What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we are continuing to talk about the June 2024 rules update for Warhammer 40,000. In my last video, I talked about the brand new movement rules that have been introduced to the game, and today we're talking about the new stratagem rules that have been rolled out. This is a total revolution to how free stratagem and stratagem duplication effects are implemented. These have been changed several times over the 10th edition of the game to change what stratagems they can be used on, but this is probably the biggest change that we've seen to these styles of abilities. We've also seen some changes to core stratagems that I will be breaking down here. Now we're going to be moving to the core rules update document. Let's dive in first and talk about those core stratagems. This includes command reroll. The big change here is that command reroll can now be used when you are fast dice rolling rolls. Traditionally, attacks in 40k are resolved using batch rolling. You roll all your hits and all your wounds, your opponent takes all their saves, and then you assign damage as it breaks down. This is called fast dice rolling and has allowances in the core rules. However, they are fairly strict, and fast dice rolling is only allowed in situations where the exact results of independent attacks within that batch roll wouldn't matter. If you had reroll styles of effects like command reroll, that could change how you would reroll and how you would assign damage, so oftentimes events would rule that in order to use dice manipulation like command reroll, you had to roll your saves and or damage rolls, whatever you wanted to reroll, independently one at a time and use the command reroll at the time after you rolled that individual dice. That stops you from knowing, for example, that you would die exactly to the attack after all the saves are rolled and then choose to use command reroll then. This change now allows you to do that. So, while most players already played it like this, and in order to save time, most events allowed this, you can, codified within the core rules, roll all of your saves and choose to command reroll then when the results have been finally determined. Now, there is one caveat to this, and that is random damage weapons. According to the fast dice roll rules, saving throws and damage cannot be fast dice rolled if the damage of the weapon is random. Random damage weapons, the damage value of their attacks are determined as the failed save is applied. So after the save is failed, immediately you then roll the damage to see if that model is dead, or you'll continue to take saves on that individual model. Those still must be rolled sequentially, and command reroll gets inserted into that normal sequence. So while for all other types of attacks, you can roll all your hits, all your wounds, the opponent can roll all the saves, choose to command reroll, and then you apply damage. For random dice rolls, you roll all the hits, all the wounds, and then roll out the saving throws and damage characteristics sequentially. Most of the time, this doesn't matter so much. If you know you're not going to command reroll, you can just say, hey, I'm just going to take all my saves, and then we'll deal damage as it gets applied in an order, and that's totally fine. This is the one instance where you could not use fast dice rolling with command reroll, but it's nice to have that clarified in the rules one way or another. The next one is a stratagem I have a whole video about that has been now outdated, so that's great. Thanks, guys. The grenade stratagem has been significantly nerfed. You cannot now use it with units that have advanced, fallen back, or have already shot, which was the case previously, but the advancing and falling back is new. In addition, the grenade is thrown from an individual model, where previously you would roll a ranged measurement between the grenade unit that was using the stratagem and the target unit. If they were within 8 inches and your grenade unit could see that unit, meaning any model in the unit had line of sight to any of their models, you could use the stratagem on them. So you could create weird situations where you were throwing a grenade at a model 8 inches away that no one in your unit could see, but you could see someone else that was at the end of a coherency string 20 inches away from them, and that made the other unit an eligible target for your grenade, which didn't really make sense, but was how the rules worked. That is no longer the case. Now you pick one model in your unit to throw the grenade, measure range and line of sight from them to target an enemy unit within 8 inches and visible. Nice. Tank Shock has also similarly gotten a huge debuff, although it's a bit of a side grade. Tank Shock has traditionally been very good for vehicles that are already good in melee. They have high strength characteristic melee attacks, and in the past, you would roll dice to inflict mortal wounds on a 5-up equal to the strength characteristic of those attacks. That's no longer the case. Tank Shock conceptually represents the tank impacting you with its hull, so the fact that it would use a melee weapon to do that was a little bit weird. Now it rolls dice equal to the toughness value of the vehicle, which makes it good for high toughness tanks, less good for medium toughness walkers. In the past, it was only ever used to enhance the melee effectiveness of already strong melee opponents, not really used with actual tanks, and now it's going to be much better on heavy vehicles like Land Raiders or Baneblades, a little bit worse on units like Wardog Carnivores who have good melee weapons but not as high of a toughness value. It also is going to do a lot less damage on average. Previously, you could roll 16, 18, 20 dice based on your strength characteristic and the toughness of your target. Now you just roll base toughness characteristics, so you're oftentimes rolling 9, 10, 12 dice rather than the massive heights of dice that you could roll with a big knight. Now, last but certainly not least, in terms of changes in this document, Heroic Intervention has been reduced from 2 CP down to 1 CP. This is a big paradigm shift in 40k because previously Heroic Intervention was an interesting threat, but not one that you would often walk into. Your opponent has to be holding up a lot of command points, and they have to be threatening you with a unit that A, can charge into you. You'll be able to fight first if you charged, and a heroically intervening unit would not necessarily be able to, so they also had to be resilient and also in a position to change the game state meaningfully, either by hitting you back or by taking objectives or contesting things. So the stars kind of had to align for Heroic Intervention to be useful. Now, it's just half as expensive, so way more often you're going to see Heroic Intervention from things like monsters, walkers, random utility units, and use that charge move to block future charge lanes, to prevent pile-in and consolidation moves, or to flip objectives. This is going to make you think twice about when you charge into your opponent's army, and it's also going to make charging much more difficult, since you have to be executing your charge move in a way to prevent potential heroic interveners from messing up your game plan. So before we move on, there have been a couple specific types of stratagems that have been changed as well. So we have moved over documents here. We're now looking at the balanced data slate for June 2024. First off are lone operative styles of stratagems. These are stratagems that prevent enemies from targeting you from greater than 12 inches away. In cases where stratagems have this effect, that effect has been extended to 18 inches, so enemies will be able to target you if they're within 18 rather than 12. Now, there are many instances of stratagems like this that have multiple effects. They not only make you untargetable outside a certain distance, but they will also provide an additional bonus. In these cases, only the portion of the stratagem that prevents targeting within that 12-inch distance, and that's specifically 12 inches. If, for example, the Tyranid Vanguard Onslaught stratagem that enhances the effect of Lone Operative to make it 6 inches is in play, that 6-inch measurement will still remain. However, the 12-inch version of it, when you use it on a unit that does not have Lone Operative as standard, will be extended to 18 inches. In addition, stratagems that add new units to your army have been restricted to only be used once per game. Now, I did see some questions about this effect. This only applies to stratagems such as Reinforcements or the Tyranid Unending Storm stratagem that takes a unit that was destroyed, duplicates it, and places it back into your reserve pool. If you have stratagems like Divine Intervention from Hallowed Martyrs that takes a destroyed unit and sets that specific unit back up on the table, that is unaffected. This only affects the stratagems that will duplicate an existing unit and create a copy of it. This is a huge change for factions like Astra Militarum, who have relied on these reinforcement stratagems very heavily in the past, but in some instances has created situations like the Kazarkin that I've talked about in a previous video that have become incredibly strong with the ability to constantly reinforce them and compound the strength of such effects. Now, the other big change that we have to talk about here are changes to free stratagem effects. Previously, early on in the edition, it was changed so that any effects that allow you to use a stratagem for free can only be used on battle tactics. In fact, any ability whatsoever that changed the value, the command point cost of a stratagem, could only be used on battle tactics, whether that was good or bad for you. That has been changed, however. All of that battle tactic nomenclature totally gone. Rules that allow you to use generic stratagems for free. The example given is the Rights of Battle on a Space Marine Captain can simply reduce the CP value of that stratagem by 1. An effect that allows you to use a specific 2 CP stratagem for free, for example, would still reduce that cost to 0. However, an effect like a Captain, like Robute Gilliman, a Tyranid Hive Tyrant, all of these abilities that give you a stratagem usage for free, simply reduce the points cost of that stratagem by 1. So if you were to use a 2 CP stratagem, it would be reduced to 1 CP instead of being free. Now, the other benefit that these styles of abilities often had is that you could use them to duplicate a stratagem, to use a stratagem that had already been used in the same phase. That has been changed. Similar to this CP cost manipulation ruling, the only time that stratagem duplication works is now if the ability specifies a stratagem. So for example, Azurman from Eldari can use Fire Overwatch even if Fire Overwatch has already been used in that phase. However, Rites of Battle from a Space Marine Captain that allows you to use any stratagem for free cannot be used to duplicate because it doesn't specify the name of any stratagems. That portion of the ability no longer works. This means that in very few circumstances are stratagems going to be duplicated, and high command point cost stratagems are never going to be duplicated for free. So there are no more circumstances where you can use stratagem duplication effects like stacking a Space Marine Captain and Rabuti Gilliman to use a stratagem for free multiple times. You can only use the stratagem once, and again, it's not necessarily going to be free. This is an enormous change. Not only does it revert to the change where battle tactic stratagems have special rules as compared to other stratagem categories, but it also means that you can no longer pin your game plan on duplicating a specific stratagem a bunch of different times using special units like captains. It also means that you can't rely on free stratagem effects to make expensive stratagems cheap. So combos like Ursula Creed and Astra Militarum using Fields of Fire to give your units +1 AP and just spamming that on a mortar team every turn still will tax you 1 command point every turn. It's no longer usable entirely for free. That said, the ability to use such effects on any stratagem you want is a big change and will make these abilities a lot more flexible. Now, the other way that these cost of stratagems was commonly manipulated was Agents of Vect effects, or CP tax effects. Abilities that allowed you to choose an enemy stratagem that became more expensive each time your opponent used it for the future of the game. These have also been entirely redefined. Now, every model that has a rule that would increase the cost of an opponent's stratagem, the rule is replaced with the Lord of Deceit aura. This ability reads, each time your opponent targets a unit from their army with a stratagem, if that unit is within 12 inches of the model with the aura, increase the cost of that use of that stratagem by 1 command point. Now, this seems like it would be a pretty significant downgrade. You have to be up close to your opponent. It's only affecting 1 use of a stratagem. You can't even use it to tax a stratagem multiple times. But this ability is insane. First of all, let's talk about the units that it affects. The biggest one and the most common one that we've seen previously is the Calidus Assassin, a nimble lone operative assassin character from Agents of the Imperium that's able to use uppy-downy effects to redeploy itself around the table. This is probably maybe the one instance where this ability is an actual downgrade from the previous Reign of Confusion that she used to have, whereas the Calidus Assassin normally flits around the edges of the table completing objectives, and then when your opponent uses a powerful, previously battle tactic stratagem, you could use Reign of Confusion to tax it for the remainder of the game. Now, she has to be up within 12 inches of an opponent's unit. She can enable that, however, by using her ability to redeploy to jump up next to enemy units. And when she does so, any stratagem that your opponent would try to use on that unit has its cost increased, probably doubled from 1 to 2. So let's say that our friend Limmy the Land Raider over here is up in the center of the battlefield bullying our army. Our opponent is holding up a command point to either use Overwatch if we try to move up and engage this Land Raider in close combat or move out aggressively to attack it, or Armor of Contempt or even Smokescreen if we are going to shoot it with our ranged attacks. However, our heroine Callie the Calidus Assassin can redeploy 12 inches away from that Land Raider, potentially inside 12 inches to be overwatched, but it won't matter if our opponent only has 1 command point left. As soon as that Calidus Assassin appears, and this model tries to overwatch her and respond, that overwatch gets increased to cost 2, so it can no longer afford to overwatch unless it's holding 2 CP. In addition, all of its defensive stratagems, Armor of Contempt, Smokescreen, whatever else it might have, are similarly increased by 1 CP, meaning that either our opponent is going to have much more limited access to them, or they won't be able to afford them at all. That basically almost essentially battle shocks this unit and allows you to hammer blow them with your other attackers and kill them much more more easily than they would normally be able to. And this is the case for every single instance of this ability in the game. They all work like this, and they can all be used in this situation. And while I mentioned the Calidus Assassin might actually be one of the least exciting models to have this ability on, when you consider that units like Bjorn the Fell-Handed, a close combat-oriented dreadnought, the Drukhari Archon, and the Swarm Lord all have this same effect, meaning that they are all going to project an aura that increases the cost of every one of their opponent's stratagems. This is good both offensively in a situation like I just mentioned, and defensively if your opponent is charging into you and trying to use offensive stratagems to buff their own melee or short-ranged attacks. In addition, many of these abilities require that the model that has them is the Warlord. Now, this could get clarified in the future. However, the Lord of Deceit ability totally overrides the existing ability that they would normally have. Meaning that, for example, a Drukhari Archon that has the rule on their datasheet, which is only usable if they are the Warlord, instead replaces that entire rule with the 12-inch aura of stratagem cost increasing. They could potentially be running around with up to 3 Archons, each of which is broadcasting this aura. Now, this could get changed. I'm not sure that this is the intention of the rule, but currently that is how it works as written. This new effect has dramatic implications on the 40k metagame. Inclusion and the ability to deal with these Lord of Deceit auras will make a fight over the middle of the table way different. If your opponent is able to project this aura and you have no way to prevent it or kill the unit who's carrying it, they're going to absolutely dominate that fight, since they'll be able to use their stratagems totally unmolested, and all of your stratagems are going to have their cost doubled, making you both take more damage, deal less damage, and have less tricks represented during your opponent's turn. This is an enormous change that is going to totally redefine the units that have access to these styles of abilities. So let me know down in the comment section what you think about these styles of abilities and the dramatic changes that have been made to how stratagem interaction works in 40k. Big thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing, and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.